Creepy gas station stories late at night to help you relax. For the best experience, put on your headphones and listen closely. Some things are only heard in the silence of the night. If you find yourself holding your breath at any point in this story, go ahead and hit that like button. And if you're ready for more tales that haunt the night, subscribe to Dr. Scary Tales for new videos every week. It was just past midnight when I found myself pulling off the highway, the gas gauge hovering dangerously close to empty. The gas station ahead glowed like a forgotten relic from the past, one of those old stations with flickering neon signs and a weather-beaten roof. I hadn't planned to stop, but out here in the middle of nowhere, the choices were scarce. It was either stop now or risk running out of gas in the pitch black of a desolate road. The air felt heavy, thick with moisture, as if a storm was just waiting to roll in. As I slowed to a stop by the lone pump, the engine fell silent, leaving only the faint hum of the overhead lights. I stepped out of the car and took in the scene around me. There was a strange stillness, the kind that made your skin prickle. This wasn't the kind of place you'd want to linger. The convenience store looked dimly lit, and the only sign of life was the faint outline of someone behind the counter, their face obscured by shadow. I felt the weight of exhaustion, but something else too, something creeping into the edges of my awareness, like I wasn't as alone as I thought. If you're listening with headphones, you might want to turn the volume up a bit, but because from here on, things start to get strange. The gas station was small, surrounded by tall, dark trees that seemed to swallow the night. The air smelled faintly of gasoline and rain-soaked pavement, though the sky above remained clear. There were no sounds, aside from the faint rustling of wind through the trees. Not even the usual chirp of crickets or distant cars. Just silence. I scanned the area, one solitary pump. A narrow road that seemed to disappear into the forest. And the flickering neon sign above that buzzed like it was struggling to stay alive. Everything felt old, abandoned, as if the station was clinging to life in a place where time had forgotten it. As I began to pump gas, I caught the faintest sound of laughter. Not the kind of laugh you'd hear from a group of friends, but something distant, eerie. It seemed to come from behind the station, but I brushed it off, thinking maybe it was the wind playing tricks on my tired mind. I had been driving for hours, my thoughts spinning in an endless loop. Earlier that day, I'd gotten into a fight with my brother, nothing major, but it was one of those lingering arguments that leaves you feeling uneasy. We'd been out of touch for years, and this was supposed to be our reunion, a road trip to clear the air, but he backed out at the last minute, leaving me to drive these long stretches of highway alone. Maybe that was why everything felt so off. Or maybe it was just the loneliness seeping into my bones. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, though. That old gut instinct I had tried to bury with logic was bubbling up, telling me to leave, to get back on the road. But I didn't listen. I never did. As I stood there, the pump ticking away slowly, and I heard it again, that laughter, this time closer. It wasn't joyful, no. It was more like Someone laughing to themselves, low and breathy, like they were enjoying a private joke, the kind that made your stomach churn, because it didn't belong in a place like this. I glanced around the side of the building, half expecting to see someone lurking in the shadows, but there was no one there, just the trees swaying gently in the wind. I shook my head, telling myself I was just tired. After all, it was late. The mind plays tricks when it's exhausted. But the tension lingered, like something unseen was watching, waiting for me to let my guard down. I tried to focus on the task at hand, filling the tank, getting back on the road. I just wanted to leave. Just as I replaced the pump nozzle, a faint buzzing sound came from the old payphone at the edge of the lot. It was strange. Those things hadn't worked in years. I was sure of it. The screen flickered, and for a moment, I thought I saw my name flash across the display. But when I blinked, it was gone. My heart began to pound a little harder. This was wrong. I knew it, but I couldn't look away. Against my better judgment, I walked over to the phone, staring at the old weathered receiver. It didn't ring, but there was a message on the screen. A single word, stay. I could feel my breath catch in my throat. This was no prank. Something was wrong. Just as I backed away, the door to the convenience store creaked open. The figure I'd noticed earlier stood in the doorway, staring out into the night. Their face was still obscured, but they were dressed in a tattered jacket. One sleeve frayed and hanging loose. Everything okay? The figure asked, voice rough like gravel. But something about it seemed off. Like they weren't really asking about the gas, or the phone, or anything I could explain. There was a strange calm in their voice that made my skin crawl. I'm fine. I replied quickly, though my voice trembled. Just leaving, the figure nodded, stepping back into the shadows, their presence lingering like a bad dream. I hurried back to my car, my hands shaking as I fumbled for the keys. But when I turned the ignition, nothing happened. No click. No hum of the engine. Just silence. My heart pounded in my chest, and the laughter returned. Louder now, echoing through the trees. Frantic, I tried again. Still nothing. That's when I saw it. A figure. Not the same as before, but something else. Moving between the trees. Its movements were unnatural, jerking and twitching as if it didn't quite belong in its own body. And it was watching me. I don't remember making the decision to run, but suddenly I was out of the car, sprinting toward the road. The trees closed in around me, the sounds of the gas station fading into the distance. But no matter how far I ran, I could still hear that laughter, always behind me, never fading. I don't know how long I ran on or when the trees finally gave way to open fields, but when I stopped, gasping for breath, I found myself standing at another gas station. The same gas station, same flickering neon sign, same lone pump. It was as if I had never left. The car was there, keys still in the ignition. The figure stood in the doorway just as before, and then I realized I'd never left. If this story left you feeling uneasy, you won't want to miss what's coming next. subscribe to Dr. Scary Tales, and don't forget, the night always holds its secrets. I wish I could say that was the end of my strange experiences with gas stations, but it wasn't. The next time I found myself at a gas station in the dead of night, it was a very different kind of place. This one wasn't isolated in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by dark forests. No, this one was perched at the edge of a small, forgotten town, a town that looked like it had been abandoned by time itself. I hadn't planned to stop again so soon, but there it was, an eerie glow in the distance drawing me in like a moth to a flame. I was low on gas, again, and my GPS was giving me strange directions that led me further and further off the main roads. It was almost like it wanted me to get lost. The streets were deserted, the kind of place that makes you wonder if anyone actually lives there. The buildings were old, their paint peeling and windows broken. A faint, sickly yellow light flickered from the lone gas station, the only thing still alive in this dead town. It stood at the corner of the street, its pumps rusted, its sign barely legible. There was something about this place. It felt like it had been waiting for me, and I pulled up to one of the pumps, the car's engine sputtering as it finally gave up the fight. Stepping out into the thick night air, the smell hit me first. Not gasoline this time, but something more earthy, damp and sour, like mold creeping through the cracks of a forgotten basement. The quiet here was oppressive, hanging in the air like a thick fog. Even the usual hum of insects or distant cars was absent, replaced by a heavy stillness. I glanced at the convenience store, where the windows were smeared with dirt and grime. The door was ajar, barely hanging on its hinges. Something in my gut told me to keep my distance. The town around me seemed suspended in a moment of decay. Faded storefronts lined the street, each more dilapidated than the last. I imagined that once, long ago, this place was alive with people going about their lives. But now it felt as if the town had been forgotten even by time itself. A strange mist clung to the ground, swirling around my feet like it had a mind of its own. Above, the sky was clear, the stars twinkling faintly, but that offered no comfort. The gas station, illuminated by a flickering overhead light, was the only beacon in the suffocating darkness. The smell of rot lingered in the air, more pungent now as I approached the store. I could feel something watching me, though I couldn't see it. My chest tightened and a bead of sweat trickled down the back of my neck. I had to keep reminding myself to breathe. This time I wasn't running from a broken relationship or a failed attempt at reconnecting with family. No, this was different. I was just passing through. No emotional baggage, no personal stakes, at least that's what I thought. But the moment I set foot in that town, I felt it. Something had shifted, like stepping into another world, one just slightly askew from reality. My name is Tyler. I'm not someone who scares easily. At least I didn't used to be. But lately, everything's been off, like the world had tilted on its axis, and I was the only one who noticed. I was on my way to meet some old friends for a weekend camping trip, trying to unwind after a few stressful months. Work had been brutal, life had been lonelier than usual, and this trip was supposed to help me clear my head. But now all I wanted was to get away from this place. I didn't care about gas anymore. I just needed to leave it, but I couldn't. The tank was empty. I walked toward the door of the convenience store, telling myself I'd just pay for the gas and be on my way. Simple, quick. But as I pushed the door open, the rusted bell above it jangled, and a cold rush of air hit me like I'd walked into a freezer. The inside of the store was even worse than the outside. Dust covered the shelves, and old expired snacks lined the counters. The fridges hummed weakly in the back, their glass doors fogged with condensation, though I doubted they were working. There was no one behind the counter, no attendant in sight. I stood there for a moment, debating whether to leave, when something on the counter caught my eye. A photo, old and worn, of a group of people standing outside the gas station. But something was wrong. Their faces were blurred, distorted, as if the picture had been warped by time or by something else. My heart started racing. I didn't know why, but I felt an overwhelming need to look away. I backed toward the door, but before I could reach it, a voice stopped me. "You're not from here, are you?" The voice was quiet, but it carried an unsettling weight. I turned to see an old man standing at the far end of the store, his back hunched and his eyes fixed on me. His clothes were ragged, his skin pale and sickly. There was something about his eyes. They were too wide, too alert. He wasn't just staring at me. He was watching me, no. I replied, my voice shaky. "Just passing through." He nodded slowly, his lips curling into a thin smile. "Not many people pass through here anymore. The kind that made your throat tighten, waiting for the next word to fall like a hammer. You should leave," he said finally, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm trying," I said, my eyes darting to the door. "I just need gas," he smiled again, wider this time. "The gas won't help you." Before I could ask what he meant, the lights flickered, and in that brief moment of darkness, the old man disappeared. I stood frozen, my mind trying to rationalize what had just happened. But nothing made sense. The store was empty again, except for me and the photo on the counter. I stumbled out of the store, my chest heaving with panic. My car was still there, but now it looked wrong, like it didn't belong in this world anymore. The once familiar sound of the engine was replaced with a deafening silence. As I approached the car, I noticed something carved into the hood. A symbol, one I didn't recognize, but it felt ancient, ominous. I ran my fingers over it, and the metal beneath my hand felt cold, too cold. Without thinking, I jumped into the car and turned the key. To my surprise, the engine roared to life. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. As I pulled out of the gas station, the road ahead seemed to stretch endlessly. No matter how long I drove, the town never got any further behind me. The gas station stayed in my rearview mirror, always the same distance away. I drove faster, panic setting in as I tried to escape this nightmarish loop. But every turn led me back to the same street, the same gas station. I could see it clearly now in the mirror. The symbol on the hood of my car was glowing faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. It was then that I realized I wasn't leaving. Not ever. My heart raced as the realization sunk in. The town wasn't letting me go. I slowed the car to a stop, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. In the distance, I could see the faint outline of the old man standing at the edge of the gas station, watching me, waiting. I don't know how long I sat there, but I understood now. This town, this gas station, it was a trap, and I had walked right into it. Have you ever felt trapped in a place you couldn't escape from? Share your experiences in the comments, if you can. But if you think that was strange, there's another story that'll keep you up even longer. One that happened not too far from here. As I pulled in, there was a strange quietness. No hum of cars on the nearby interstate, no insects buzzing in the heavy summer air, just a dead silence that pressed in all around me, like the world had gone still the moment I decided to stop. I parked at the farthest pump, the furthest point from the store's door. The building was old, like it had been there far longer than the city surrounding it. The paint was chipped, and the windows were streaked with grime. The sign overhead read simply, "Gas," no fancy branding or advertisements, just a single word glowing in faded neon. The wind had picked up, but it wasn't cooling. Instead, it carried a faint smell of something burning. Not fire, but the acrid scent of something metallic, like overheating machinery. I glanced around, searching for the source, but the station was empty. No attendants, no other customers, just me and the pumps that clicked quietly in the night. I wasn't exactly eager to be here. I'd always heard the stories, but like most people, I brushed them off. Urban legends, rumors. None of it could be real. But standing there under the flickering light, I started to wonder. My name's Mike. I've lived in this city for most of my life, but I never really believed in that supernatural crap. Ghost stories are for kids, right? But the more I thought about it, the more I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that maybe, just maybe, that there was a reason people talked about this place. My hand hovered over the pump handle for a moment, my mind racing with the urge to just leave. But my tank was nearly empty, and I had miles to go before I reached the campsite. I told myself I was being paranoid. I forced myself to grip the pump and start fueling up. That's when I heard it. A faint whisper carried on the wind. At first, I thought it was the wind or the pump making some weird noise, but it was too deliberate. A voice, low and indistinct, like someone talking just out of earshot. I looked around, but the station was still empty. The lights inside the store flickered weakly, casting shifting shadows that danced across the pavement. I strained to listen, trying to catch the words. It was coming from the far side of the station, near the picnic tables. That's when I noticed something I hadn't before. Someone was sitting at one of the tables. It was a woman, her back to me, hunched over like she was reading something or maybe writing in a notebook. She was wearing a long coat, despite the oppressive heat, and her hair fell in tangled waves down her back. She was too still, like a statue. I hadn't noticed her when I pulled in, but now, she was the only thing I could focus on. I called out, but she didn't respond, just kept sitting there, motionless, with her head bowed. I decided to finish fueling up as quickly as possible, my eyes darting between the pump and the woman at the table. The air felt thicker now, and that metallic burning smell was stronger. I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting. It was late. I was tired, and my mind was playing tricks on me. I was about to hang up the pump when the whispering came again, louder this time, clearer. "Don't leave." The voice wasn't hers, I was sure of that now. It seemed to come from all around me, like the station itself was whispering. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest, waiting for something to happen, but there was nothing, just the quiet hum of the lights and the distant sound of the interstate. I turned back to the woman at the picnic table, but she was gone. Just gone. Feeling the adrenaline rush through me, I decided to head inside the store, thinking maybe I could ask the clerk about the woman. The door creaked as I pushed it open, the smell of stale air and something faintly chemical filling my lungs. The store was empty, no clerk in sight. As I stepped toward the counter, I noticed something strange. The clock on the wall behind the register was frozen. The hands pointed to 3:27, but they hadn't moved since I walked in. I checked my phone. The time was 3:27. I glanced back at the door, but something stopped me from leaving. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was just plain stupidity. But I stayed. I stood there, staring at the clock, waiting for it to tick forward. But it didn't. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't alone. I heard the sound of footsteps behind me, slow, deliberate. Turning around, I saw a man standing near the back of the store, his face partially hidden in the shadow. His skin was scorched, dark and leathery, as though he'd been burned alive. He stared at me with eyes that seemed too bright for his ruined face, his lips moving silently. I couldn't make out what he was saying, but the longer I looked, the more I felt my throat tighten. The air in the store grew hotter, suffocating, and that burning smell intensified until it was all I could breathe. My head started spinning, and the walls seemed to close in around me. Then the whisper came again, louder, more insistent. "Don't leave!" I stumbled toward the door, trying to push it open, but it wouldn't budge. The burned man moved closer, his mouth twitching as if he were laughing silently. My hands clawed at the door, but it stayed firmly shut. The lights flickered, and for a brief moment, I saw the woman standing outside the store again, watching me from the other side of the glass. The clock on the wall began to move backward, the hands ticking rapidly in reverse. I don't remember how I got out of the store. One moment I was inside, and the next I was back at the pump, my car idling beside me. I stared at the gas station, the lights flickering weakly, the burned man and the woman both gone. But the feeling remained, the sense that I had stepped into something I wasn't meant to see. I drove away, the road stretching out in front of me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't really left. The time on my phone, still 3:27, it hasn't changed. And somehow I don't think it ever will. Have you ever seen something you couldn't explain? Something that felt wrong even when everything looked normal? Share your story in the comments if you dare.